Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world right now. Welcome back to our third presentation panel today on our third day of our third annual seminar of the Georgie Danis Seminar in Eastern Mediterranean Diplomacy and Security. And it's with a great pleasure that we welcome our next presenter, Dr. Hasnaoui, who I've come across in her written work and have seen her on television and her analysis, and I've been eager for this discussion and presentation on the Libya conflict and the geopolitical consequences in the region. I will turn the floor over to our IMS intern, Julia Jenks, who will do the introduction, and looking forward to this great informative discussion. And you'll hear back from me after the presentation. Thank you. Thank you for coming, Dr. Hasnaoui.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Van Vakas.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Van Vakas. Today I have the distinct pleasure of introducing Dr. Hasnaoui. She's an assistant professor of humanities and political science at the American International University of Kuwait. She's led many communications with NGOs, as well as working in the field of education in Morocco and the United States for more than 11 years. She's also often a guest speaker at many forums, events focused on human rights, and programs such as this one today. Before turning the microphone over to our speaker, just know that I will act as the host of the event and guide the Q&A, which will follow the 30 to 45-minute presentation. The duration of our program is going to be about an hour and 30 minutes. So at this point, I'm going to have all participants turn off their microphones and use either the chat or the raise hand feature to ask questions. And we're going to try to answer all questions at the end. So thank you everyone for coming today, and we're looking forward to have a productive presentation and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Julia, for this presentation. Thank you, Dr. Van Vakas, for inviting me. Thank you all for the Institute of Eastern Mediterranean Studies for inviting me to take part of this timely conversation along with seasoned experts and wonderful students. So I would like, first of all, before I talk about the Libya conflicts, I would like to start to talk a little bit about the Mediterranean region in the past, and then I will just speak about how it looked like now with the Libyan conflict and its security implication in the Eastern Mediterranean. So the Mediterranean region, before it was considered as the cradle of global civilizations, that has undoubtedly contributed to human development. It has played a significant role in communications between peoples and established, exchanges at the cultural level. The Mediterranean was once, as many of you know, the nexus of the world and an international economic center where maritime navigation contributed to the development of trade routes and the immersion of city-states. The Mediterranean has been also a source of natural resources, rich in fossil fuels and mineral wealth. Why I'm saying that? Because I'm coming up to how it happens now. Now I'm going to I would like, first of all, to contextualize the moment we are living in. The Eastern Mediterranean is a term that has emerged in common usage only in the past decade or so. It became an important concept as issues in Europe and the Middle East began to merge. Three main developments were primary in this regard. First of all, major natural gas finds offshore in Egypt, Cyprus in the years of 2009, 2011, and 2015. Secondly, Russia's 2015 intervention in Syria, which marked the first post-Soviet return of Russia to the Middle East and gave it a base for injecting proxies into Libya and sub-Saharan Africa. Thirdly, Turkey's emergence as interventionist power in the Arab Middle East, as well as the Mediterranean, and most notably in North Africa, specifically in Libya. So these developments led to an intensified conflict in the region. So now, where does Libya stand here? Libya has unique geographical location, if you've seen on the map, and a significant natural wealth. However, this blessing also comes alongside many disputes with its neighboring countries. Since 2011, Libya had entered a political vacuum following the Arab Spring that has resulted in chaos at all levels. In 2014, two main armed conflicts started. The first started in Benghazi region in Libya, known as Operation Dignity, and the second Operation Libya Dawn, which began in June as protests against election results. Then that Libya was officially divided into East and West. Now, after a long struggle, the United Nations managed to broker, a peace deal between the rival parties in the East and the West, and the government of national accord came into power that actually was replaced recently by the GNU, the Government of National Unity. However, I think that the promised peace was not achieved, and the following years witnessed political unrest, armed conflicts, and economic crisis in Libya, which is now in a state of gridlock, and the interventions of many powers, and this is where I'm going to focus on, such as Egypt, such as Russia, such as Western powers, and such as some powers in the other countries in the Middle East that have worsened the political divisions. So now we are living in a post-Gaddafi era. The crucial challenge for Libya has been security issues and political uncertainty that has affected not only the country, but other regions in the Eastern Mediterranean. So over the past several decades, holding elections in Libya has become a fundamental part of the international community's peace building plan to establish a functioning and legitimate government in an unstable country. Elections, as you may know, they generally have in any country that lives like instability, that has a divided government, that actually came out of events like the Arab Spring. So elections have a key role in war to peace transition as they mark a transition from violent to peaceful modes of political contestations and spread efforts or more elusive and legitimate governance. Yet this has not happened, unfortunately, in Libya for more than a decade. So Libyans right now are tired, are exhausted after a decade of war, after a decade of division and occupation. Therefore, the planned elections had raised the whole hope of breaking a deadlock, even though many Libyans seemed eager to take to the poll, as 2.8 million of them have signed to vote last year. However, the elections were again postponed indefinitely when numerous parties disagreed on either eligibility criteria or candidates or election rules. So these failures to hold the polls significantly damaged the international effort to end actually this political crisis, and it has opened a new chapter in Libya's long-running political stalemate with rival governments in the East and the West, once again claiming legitimacy. So additionally, we have here also, this didn't help because now this division has led the influence of external powers, of external actors, as spoilers precludes any successes of the governments, and incentivizing, I would put it this way, parties in Libya to negotiate a solution. So it is true that I would say Libya's domestic instability and the absence of government with adequate legitimization, power and control, despite the government of national unity being the internationally recognized, but its mandate has expired, has had an effect on money and on many policies, issues, and geographical locations. There is also the fact that these situations allows various external actors to use the country to promote their own agendas. For instance, you have the Turkey Government of National Unity Agreement, which is a good example of how the lack of a political settlement will continue to produce, I would say, instability, geopolitical problems, and security threats, with implication not only in the future of Libya itself, but for the broader region as well, especially among countries such as Turkey, such as Greece, Egypt, Cyprus, and of course, Libya. Now, this Libyan civil war increasingly has become a proxy war because of the country's, of course, oil reserves and its high migration flow, and the civil wars, various Islamist, liberal-leaning, and anti-Islamist movements. Several regional and international players have been involved. I would say there are also a number of foreign states that have intervened, primarily to curb the influence of their rivals. Thus, Libya is increasingly subject to dynamics of regional struggles that have shaped the MENA region, the so-called, Arab Cold War. As noted earlier, what I've said, not only have countries like Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Qatar, and the UAE invested their interest in the future of post-Gaddafi Libya, but also European states such as Italy and France. Even if France, we don't see it as that is interfering as before, but still, there is still an interference. They have taken active role. And finally, the Russia's Wagner Group, which is closer to the Russian government, which is a shadowy paramilitary organizations tied to the Kremlin that has played a significant role in Libya, supporting the Khalifa Haftar self-styled Liberation National Army, the LNA, in the country's civil war. Finally, even if the United Nations has been engaged in finding a solution, but still, I mean, with the interference of this country, I don't think that we're going to see a solution in Libya when it comes to a stabilized government. Now, when it comes to the geopolitical repercussion in the Eastern Mediterranean, apart from instability and various domestic external issues, the Libya conflict and the country's political dynamics have also direct and indirect repercussions for interstate relations in the Eastern Mediterranean. A case in point, again, I'm going to go back to Turkey. Turkey's close relationship with the then GNA, the Government of National, the Government of National Accord, and which became the GNU, the Government of National Unity, and the latter's dependence on Ankara's support has transformed into a regional dispute, exacerbating pre-existing problems on maritime zone. On November 2019, Turkey and the GNU of Libya signed a maritime boundary treaty in order to establish an exclusive economic zone in the Mediterranean Sea, which means that they claim rights to ocean bed resources. The issue of maritime borders and boundaries has for decades been a sore point in the Eastern Mediterranean, and especially for the Greek-Turkish relationship. This agreement has affected not only the relations with Greece and Cyprus, but also many other countries, like we have seen. It angered also Egypt and many countries. So, which for them, they consider this agreement as void and violates the international law of sea. In October 2022, Turkey and Libya again signed the agreement, a memorandum of understanding to conduct hydrocarbon exploration in the areas of the Eastern Mediterranean, disputed with Greece and Egypt. This deal was again highly condemned and criticized by Greece and Egypt, stating that the Libyan administration mandate has expired, meaning the GNU, the Government of National Unity. So many experts see that these agreements risked exasperating the regional disputes over competing maritime zone. Yet both Turkey and Libya insisted that these two agreements are in accordance with the international law, including the relevant articles of the United Nations Conventions on the Law of the Sea. So this deal follows on the heels of a 2000 agreement between Tripoli and Ankara that recognized and expanded versions of Turkey's territorial water in the Eastern Mediterranean, which elicited condemnation again, not only from Libyans, but from neighboring countries as well. So in a nutshell, this Ankara-Tripoli pact comes at a especially febrile time where we've seen that Libya is a fragile country, which still actually not recovered by the civil war, which we see that there is no the political deadlock is there. So although Greece and Turkey, they regularly accuse each other of provocation over the agency and fighter jets, the rhetoric has now cranked up to alarming levels. So I think that I personally believe that these agreements with Libya complicates the conflict. They complicate the Libya conflict, and it might raise new obstacles to the peace process. And as long as the elections are not held within the aspirations of the Libyan citizens. Now, the upcoming things I would like to add, the other element that complicates actually things in the Eastern Mediterranean regions, and also due to the conflict in Libya is the migration. There is a migration issue which is an acute challenge for the regions in this area. Migrants and asylum seekers use the central Mediterranean route to enter the European Union on irregular basis, and that affects these regions. They embark on a long, dangerous journeys from North Africa and Turkey, crossing the Mediterranean Sea to reach Italy, and to a much lesser extent also Malta. So the large majority of migrants transit through Libya on their journeys towards Europe. This has contributed, of course, to the development of a well-established and resilient smuggling and trafficking networks and Libya. So restoring peace in the region requires more concentrated and a consensus from the international community, not from a one-sided provocative actions. Therefore, I think that all parties, including Libya, should work closely to resume diplomatic multilateral talks to reach an agreement on the territorial waters in the Eastern Mediterranean. I think that all states are obliged to abide by the international law and UN conventions, especially when it comes to the principles of non-interference and respect for other countries' sovereignty and territorial water. Therefore, if the concerned countries, they fail to reach an agreement, for instance, to regulate these issues, I think that conflict over the region's economic zone should be resolved by the ICG. The region has a significant opportunity to restore its position as a center of trade and innovation. The European Union can definitely play a role in restoring peace throughout the region by leading mediation efforts with all the disputing parties, including Libya. After all, I think that the international community has an ethical commitment to act with great sensitivity when determining the fate of fragile states like Libya that are sinking into internal conflict. So I think that what is happening now is that interference in Libyan conflict that will not affect only the Eastern Mediterranean, but many parts of the regions. We have the insecurity, we have the rise of terrorism. Maybe some will tell me, okay, well, these agreements are important, they will benefit the people of Libya, but there is an issue of non-agreement between the East and the West in Libya. The problem of elections that are not happening in Libya. And Libya is still struggling in food insecurity, malnutrition, multidimensional poverty, income inequity, low agricultural production, and climate change. So I think that the international community, specifically those powers that interfere in the regions, needs to either step up to the plate genuinely to help and not take Libya as an advantage and leave the population behind. Because if they leave the population behind, that will affect the other regions in the Eastern Mediterranean when it comes to illegal immigration, when it comes to insecurity, the rise of terrorism, and the list is very long. So I thank you very much. This is all what I have to say. I'm happy to actually discuss the matter with you more, or if you have any questions, I am happy to answer your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for a very, this was a very nicely done kind of like, overview of like, what's going on in Libya and the differences, like the different sort of like, problematics in Libya. But my question to you is like, just like just as a thought, as you were describing this very accurately, is that Libya becomes just another one of those spots in the Eastern Mediterranean, which becomes almost like a magnet of different poles of power, like, and you have like two different governments, you have three different sections, yet resources are being, tapped out of Libya, and you also have like, multinationals like ENI and Total, you have like, the Gulf states taking different sides, so on and so forth. So how much of that do you see like just another one of those like, open conflict zones? Here we are, as you mentioned, like, 12 years after we're in the post-Gaddafi era. Like, how much of those other geopolitical pressures are like, pushing in a way that we can't have a solution per se?
Well, actually, I think the solution again lies in the fact that there should be non-interference. I see sometimes, and I weigh my words, I'm responsible of what I'm saying. I see that there is kind of irresponsibility from the international community, irresponsibility from these powers that come and enter into a country, and then they sign these agreements that don't benefit the populations. That's going to affect the other, the other states in the Eastern Mediterranean. That's going to give a rise to terrorism. Where have we seen, like, we have seen that they have been, how come that even if we see that an international country that enters Libya, they did not even help in socio-economic development. I understand that the European Union has been working a lot in helping the migration. We have seen a little bit of improvement, but these powers we have seen, whenever you hear them being in this country, we hear that, they are helping in the military process, helping Haftar or helping the GNU, and they are struggling actually to come up with the solution that will bring this country at peace. Everybody says that Libya is the future. Libya, the future in terms of its natural resources, in terms of its geopolitical, I would say, position. But if it is the future, then let's help Libya come on its feet, because I mean I see that there is kind of egoism in the part of this country, is not to help, when I say Libya, the citizens, to come up with the solutions. There is also, I'm not also blaming these big powers, but also internally speaking, why the GNU doesn't want to step out of the plate and bring other people that will start, like, because the mandate has expired. Why do we see Dbeiba still sticking to the power? That means, is he thinking about himself, or is he thinking about the people that are waiting, but they are suffering? Now we are seeing that the war in Ukraine and Russia that has affected not only the Eastern Mediterranean, but whole Africa, notably Libya. Lots of people have been displaced, and we're seeing the same people sticking to the same place. There is another issue. There is a little kind of, United States has been shy in this conflict. So why the United States does not come up and step up to the plate and help this conflict to be solved? That's the question I wanted to ask. And I still don't find an answer. And they know that, Biden recently has said that Africa, they have like a new policy towards Africa. How about Libya? The United States has been shy in that. They went to Central Africa, but how about North Africa? Central Africa, they don't have this, the same conflict as Libya. Libya is living in a turmoil. So it's all these ingredients that kind of make real problems and makes the real like a security problem raise or stay in these regions.
Yeah, I think that's the last point that you raised. I was going to yield the floor to Julia, but the last point that you raised, I think it's a very good one as far as the U.S. is concerned. And in some ways, I think American policymakers are still suffering not from the post-Gaddafi era, but the post-Benghazi event, and sort of like especially it became such a huge issue between the Democrats and the Republicans, and the Clinton and Hillary Clinton's part in this, and cost her the election pretty much in 2016. And I think it goes even back to Robert Gates, when he was Secretary of Defense, and the fact that he resigned over that policy on Libya when he was in the Obama administration. So I think American policymakers tend to be very shy of the political cost. And as long as the resources are coming out, that's the point that I was making earlier, as long as the resources are coming out, namely oil, then, Libya has this very perverse kind of a arrangement. Like you very accurately, you point to the well-being of the people, but in many ways, Libya is still functioning as far as providing the valuable resource. And that's the thing that makes it really problematic in some ways. So that's my, take on this, and I could be completely wrong. I'd like to hear what you have to say to that.
Absolutely, I agree with you. So I think that, but still, it is kind of unfortunately, these are the interests. These are the national interests of the country. But how about the people who live there? That's the issue. Yeah. I come from North Africa. I hear that on a daily basis how people suffer in this region, in Libya, and that affects even other countries like Algeria, like Morocco, like conflict in Western Sahara. These people become vulnerable to recruitment from terrorist organizations because they're looking for a living. And, where is the international community in that? All they say, okay, we agree that this agreement is not null, is not void. The agreement that Greece, Turkey has signed with the government of national unity. But how about the people who live there, like the citizens? So it's all about the well-being of the citizens. But I don't think that this issue will be solved anytime soon. The Eastern Mediterranean will be affected for the upcoming years. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to give like a bleak, I would say, image about the Eastern Mediterranean, but because in foreign policy, and Dr. Van Valkas, this, that in foreign policy, we have to look not only at the geopolitics, but we also have to look who governs the region. Who governs the region? We have to look even at the psychological level of these people who govern these regions. So it's important that this deserves a study, not about where they come from, but who they are as a rulers. Why the Beba is still sticks to the government of national unity, and he says, I'm not going to step out until the elections are formed. And Haftar as well says the same thing. So it's all, it's one another. It's all together.
Yeah. Julie, I don't know if there are questions.
Yeah, I have a question. So thank you for your talk. This was really engaging and helpful, and I appreciate you coming here today. But my question kind of takes a step back just to incorporate the other North African regions around this area. And I just kind of want to ask you how the situation in Libya is affecting the politics of the other countries surrounding like the countries most directly surrounding Libya.
Yeah, actually, yes, it is affecting a lot in terms of the security level. In terms of now there is a resurgence of terrorism, terrorist recruitments in North Africa. I would say Libya, Mauritania, Algeria, and Morocco. And because the vulnerability of the citizens, they are easily recruited by these terrorist organizations that infiltrate, the regions in North Africa. Countries in North Africa like Algeria or Morocco have done a lot in trying to be mediators. Morocco has been an important, I would say, an important country that hosted many meetings with the two opponents in Libya. But it does affect, absolutely, it does affect the regions in terms of security and terrorist and terrorist growth. So I think that's why everybody said, like, I was told like 10 years ago, I met like an expert and he said, well, just concentrate on Libya because this is the future. And he was right. Libya is the future. And it will be the future because of its resources. But if we don't know how to manage a solution to have Libya come on its steps, I think that it will affect regions in not only in North Africa but also in Africa and Central Africa. And here we're talking about the rise of terrorism and insecurity.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, I think it's just even like, with Chad, a country that's been, interwoven with Libyan politics going back to the 1980s, like that's where Mr. Haftar found himself back in the 1980s. But even like I think that Dr. Hasnaoui bringing up the whole immigration, the migration issue. I mean, countries like Mali and Niger are definitely like in that path, and you're seeing what's going on with things like Boko Haram and other groups that are there. I mean, such a linchpin country altogether. Yeah. So and yeah, you have like this unique, this unique sort of like perspective because you come from Morocco, you are in Kuwait, so you have like this a wide span of this part of the Arab world, and seeing both like the Gulf and North Africa, two very distinct kind of areas of the Arab world. And do you see any difference in how the Libyan situation is viewed, or even like, seeing the Gulf states in the Mediterranean for the very first time?
Well, here in the Gulf, the situation is not well known in the Gulf regions because of the geopolitical situation. But still, we see that UAE is really interfering in Libya because it's a proxy. It's a proxy. It has its own agenda. UAE, little bit of Qatar. Qatar is not like interfering a lot, but UAE is definitely interfering. But Kuwait is its foreign diplomacy. It's kind of balanced and neutral from a long time. But we've seen that UAE and Qatar are the only players in the Libya crisis, and because of the natural resources that are in Libya. But still, I mean, again, I'm going to go back to the interference of all these countries and the chances of holding elections. These stops the holding of elections, which indeed they remain slim at present, given that the most important point remain unresolved, which is the East and the West, and which is also the interference of these international or countries. So I mean that the question of for example, the candidacy of the military and dual nationals, in addition to not creating an environment in which all parties can accept the results of the elections. For example, can we imagine that one day Haftar will be the leader in Libya? Can we imagine that a military power becomes a leader of this region? That will be a chaos, because we know that in geopolitics, if a country is ruled by a military component, that's a failed state. And we have seen that happening after the elections. The second thing is, and this Haftar is actually endorsed by countries that endorse a military, I would say, power, a military component. And then we see Dbeiba, who is from the government of national unity, that has not become as popular as before. And we have seen recently that when the Arab League actually organized its meeting in Libya just last month, not all the countries came. You have only few representatives that came in the Arab League in Libya, because they said, we cannot come as long as the elections are not held. We cannot come as long as the government of national unity expired. I mean, is not renewed. So you see, it's there is a turmoil in Libya, because first of all, the interference of these regional powers, and then the second thing, the kind of these two components, the East and the West, the GNU and the GNU and Haftar, are not agreeing on one thing. So I think that hopes remain pinned on the occurrence of any breakthrough in the Libyan scene that will lead everyone to find, I would say, a map of settlement and create a consensus on the critical and overlapping issues in the constitution rule document, because there is an issue in the constitution document. And then finally, I think that going to a popular referendum remains one of the most important advantages offered, provided that the security environment is created, and provided that these international interferences that don't benefit the citizens are not in Libya anymore.
That was, yeah. Oh, sorry. Did you want to say something?
Those are I like them, but there's a major ifs. The security piece is a major if, because it's just a matter of there has been such great interest in it so far. So yeah, sorry, Julia, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna follow up with that. But it looks like we have a question in the chat about, I'll just read it out here. I have a question that I would like to ask. How does the situation in Libya affect countries in North America? So that question also interests me as well. And I think it's, if you could weigh in on this a little bit, if you can answer how much you think it's relevant to US interest.
So again, as I spoke about that earlier on, the only thing is security reasons. But geopolitically speaking, Libya is far away from the United States. The United States has been shy when it comes to Libya, apart from the Benghazi event. Biden's foreign policy recently has shifted toward Africa. Why? It's to counterattack or just contain China, right? To contain China, because China has got an important presence in Libya, in Africa, etc. But to contain China, Biden went to Africa, met with African leaders for geopolitical reasons. But I don't think that something will change, because China will not leave Africa because of the debts that Africa has from China. Africa has a lot of debts from China. There are a lot of investments in China, in Libya. So I think that how successful the US will be to help in the political process, I think that there is slim chances, because there are countries that have been present in Africa, notably in Libya, for a long time.
Yeah, thank you. I think that was a really comprehensive, good answer. And I think it's really interesting. Like you said, Libya is definitely going to be this future thing that we're going to need to talk about very soon. And I think now it's good that we're having this discussion now. Did you want to ask a question, Isaac? I think that there was, oh, there's another question in the chat.
Yeah, first of all, forgive my coming on a bit late. And thank you for your lecture on Libya. You know, there's one thing that I have to, you know, maybe be the realist and the pessimist here and push back on. Yasmine, your comments earlier on, you know, on concerns about military rule, prospects of military rule over Libya signifying a failed state and, you know, a disregard for human rights, you know, and certainly correct me if I'm miswording what you said, but you know, what is Libya now but a failed state with total disregard for human rights, for progress, for what have you? It seems to me, if anything, much of the international community would welcome a military junta being in charge of Libya in the foreseeable future. I mean, I see pushback from NATO, you know, if Wagner Group is part of it, but otherwise.
Was it a question? Sorry, what was your your question? That means that the military, I'm sorry if you can rephrase it for me.
I said,
What's
you
wrong
made
with
the
the military
argument.
junta?
I'm sorry.
What's wrong with the military junta? I think Isaac is asking.
At the moment, effectively, yes. At least it's some stability, you know, force at the barrel of the gun, but at least it's some stability in a country that, since Gaddafi was wrested from power and murdered, has seen none whatsoever.
Well, there is no instability. It just got worse and worse. I mean, I'm sure, I don't know. I think that if you follow the news, you will see that on a daily basis. You will see illegal immigration. And the military is not at all helping. Haftar was, first of all, you know, endorsed by the US. He was in the US, was endorsed by the US, went back. And if he was not the US, he would not be back to the United States, to Libya. So I don't think that with him, there is a stability. I don't think that with Dbeiba, there is a stability as long as they don't come up with the consensus. You see that the Arab countries in North Africa are not aligned. They don't want to be involved in any, I would say, agreement with Libya as long as they don't come up with the solution. They help in the election process. They help in these Arab countries. They help in the, I would say, transition process. But being involved in any meetings like Libya has done an Arab League, like organized the meeting in the Arab League, but no, they sent only representatives. But we did not see any presidents being there. A military, Libya now is a failed state. It will be even a failed state if Haftar takes over. I am not for a military system to take over. I can even cite some countries that have been failed with the military government. Algeria is a military state. It is an oligarchy, even if it has political parties. But since its independence in 1962, we have seen a military in power. Has it been successful? Not until now, because we've seen president after president that are endorsed by the military. The Hirak still exists in Algeria. Egypt as well. We've seen after the coup, after the Islamist coup, it's a military state. Has it succeeded? They live in the most economic, drastic I would say, situation ever. The sterling, their currency has been failed, has been going down. So I don't think that a military will help. Certainly it will help, but not as a rule, as ruling the country, because we need to be, I'm talking we as Arabs, we need to be conscious. First of all, there is an issue in education. Are we educated? Do we have the high level of education in order to live or understand, or the military will understand us as citizens? Is there a consciousness about it? So I don't think that the military in any country can be successful if it rules the country. Specifically in North Africa, or specifically in fragile states like Libya. Don't forget that Libya lived in dire situation during Gaddafi era. Post Gaddafi, it lived in more dire situations. When they are going to adjust, I don't think it's gonna happen now, because we've seen Russia, Wagner countries in the Gulf, the education level has gone like down. The socioeconomic life has gone down. What is the role of Haftar, or what is the role of the Beba, except from battling on a daily basis and not coming to a consensus? So I think that the way it should be done is that the international community needs to talk about this. Where do they stand? Where those two entities stand? I think the international community has not been successful in positioning Haftar, the LNA, and the GNU, in the sense that we're talking only about coming together, trying to find a consensus, but how are they positioned? What's their role? Why are they there?
Yeah, that's a very good point. In the fact that sometimes we tend to look the military intervention like we have like all these cases, especially in Latin America, where the military has stepped forward and provided a certain level of stability. Brazil or Argentina, but those are not necessarily comparable cases, as you don't have any kind of a cohesive control over territory, but you have like more feudal lords that are sort of like maintaining a structure. And my question has to do with the fact that we've seen you talk about the lack, the not interference. I think that ship has sailed. I mean, this interference is there, is about the things that I'm wondering in your estimation, and maybe I don't know if you can do that, looking at to a crystal ball kind of a thing, but we're seeing like two of the actors that have interfered. We talked about the United States maybe losing interest there, because especially after Benghazi, but then you have like a couple of other actors that might be not able to interfere the way that they have in the past. I'm talking about Russia and the Wagner group, as far as maybe looking now to Ukraine and sort of not paying that much attention. And the other one is Turkey. Turkey with like post earthquakes and dealing with its own internal domestic problems. So how do you see like the next few months, or the next the Turkish elections, or the Russian attention in Ukraine affecting the Libyan situation? And specifically, I'm thinking about even the Libyan Turkish accord.
Well, Turkey is currently sitting on the fence regarding the roadmap for its future decisions in Libya. I think there is, its dilemma is primarily about finding the right legitimate political body there that can deliver meaningful resolutions. This is why we have Turkish interests will be best served by supporting free and fair Libyan elections, even though this is a difficult goal to achieve, but nothing but election could afford, legitimacy and establish bridges among rival fractions. I think that the Beba's government has vowed to only hand over its mandate to an elected government, as I earlier said. Therefore, Turkey's effort at encouraging, and we know that Libya is endorsing the GNU, the Government of National Unity, that whose mandate has expired. So therefore, Turkey's efforts at encouraging a Libyan election will receive, of course, support from Tripoli, but without free and fair elections, I think that the House of Representatives in Eastern Libya is also taking, like, I would put it like, is also skating on a thin ice. Now, Bashaga's failures may lead to divisions with Eastern Libya's camps, and thus to the erosion of whatever political legitimacy that the House of Representatives enjoys. So I think that in such a scenario, Turkey's hopes related to, the Tobruk-based government would be dashed. So I think that without tapping into legitimacy through a fair elections, the Libyan political elite will likely remain divided with Haftar and with Dbeiba. They will also be weak. And although Ankara might find Libya's division useful for receiving more, concessions in its negotiation with Cairo and with Libya's rival government, exploiting those divisions will harm the cause of Libyan unity that remains the key and the only key to securing Turkish geopolitical and economic interests in the Eastern Mediterranean.
And does the same thing apply to Russia then? Like,
absolutely, Russia. It's the Russian are interfering for some reasons because they are interested in the resources. I don't think they care as much as Turkey when it comes to, they try to promote that we are there to help, we're there to help. But Russia is there for more lucrative purposes, more than actually helping Libya moving toward, a fair transition.
Yeah. Julie,
I hope that answers your question, Dr.
No, it does. It's just a matter of, like, it seems like, going back to 2010, this euphoric moment of, like, the Arab Spring, awakening, disaster, winter, however you want to term it, after a decade, we just seem to, have inherited a number of trouble spots.
Mhm.
And, whether, like, our scope is this moment, or we're in the process of, like, some kind of a more positive kind of an outcome and what that is. But I'm thinking on one side of the Mediterranean, you have Syria, and on the other side, you have Libya, two sort of, like, failed states right now. And then even
Mhm.
like the best case scenarios, like Tunisia, for instance, going through its democratic, authoritarian, however you want to term it, structure. And then, of course, Egypt and Algeria, in their own sort of, like, unique sphere. I'm not even going to Morocco, which seems to have a much better approach to this, and it's not necessarily even fair to put in the same kind of a basket. But to the point that you make earlier is, that you have the Emiratis who are everywhere in the region. You have the Chinese, which you mentioned that they're also in the region. And, I would add, like, the layer of the multinationals in the region that are not necessarily state actors, but they're definitely geopolitical. They have geopolitical framing. So to me, it's just a matter of, like, the more we forget about Libya, the more the Libyans will be able to find some kind of a modus vivendi for themselves. The more we care about Libya, the more the Libya gets fractured,
And I think it is very doable if the international community is aware. And again, I'm going to go back to positioning those two, I would say, factions: the Government of National Unity and the LNA, the Haftar. They have to position them and try to just communicate what's their role? What do they do this? What are they really working towards achieving peace, or are they working for their own benefits or for their own, for their own purposes? Wagner is there, like has like thousands of mercenaries that actually help demolish Libya, but they are there for, it's a private group for, for lucrative reasons, and actually they take advantage of the Ukraine-Russia war because they are in need of Libya's resources. So I think the future of Libya right now is in the hands of the kind of these powers that interfere in the region, but they have to be conscious that that's not gonna help, that's not gonna lead anywhere the Libyan citizens to come up and try to find I would say a common ground, or a situation where they can bring Libya to peace and have stability in the region. Because specifically now with the Russia and Ukraine war, there are like a lot of displacement, there is an issue in inflation, etc. So Libya is struggling more and more from the Ukraine and Russia war.
Julia?
Yeah, thank you. This has all been so interesting. I keep saying that, but I'm really enjoying this talk. So as you've been talking about it, I've just been thinking about, like, this is changing gears a little bit. Been thinking about like the physical geography of Libya. And I was wondering if you could like touch upon, give a little bit more detail about how the amount of arable land in Libya affects this conflict, whether like in terms of resources or like the sort of issues that it could help contribute to.
In what sense? Because I'm not really into like that expert in like economy, but I'm happy to answer your question if you can elaborate more on it.
Yeah, so you were talking about the resources in Libya and how countries are interested in stuff like that, and Dr. Vivakis talked about oil, and I'm just wondering if you think resources, land, all of those things combine, the ways that they contribute to the conflict, whether that's in a positive way or a negative way.
Well,
Really,
absolutely. The resources we have, Libya has got wealth in its oceans, the maritime, and also the oil. And of course, these countries are interested in Libya because of the resources. Now, in terms of international relations are not based on feelings. It's a win-win. And these countries have seen Libya, and that's why I say it's the future. I say the future because now the countries are so interested because of the natural resources that it has, and because of the maritime, the geopolitical situation of Libya. And that's why you've seen Turkey has just gone up and run off and just signed the maritime boundary, and also there was a memorandum of understanding to conduct the hydrocarbon exploration in areas of the Eastern Mediterranean disputed with Greece and Egypt, unlike other countries where they live in in dire conditions. But I mean, the countries don't interfere. Why aren't we seeing countries interfering in the Western Sahara conflict that has been undergoing more than 40 years? Why? Because there is no, they say, well, there is no oil, there is no natural resources, so why are we going to interfere in a country that has been into a war? So there is no interest. You have other countries in Central Africa that they live in dire situation, but we don't see countries like UAE, like Turkey, like Qatar, etc., interfering in these countries, because the natural resources are not there. So I think that the natural resources are important for these countries, and I think that Turkey or Russia, UAE, etc., will not leave because of the natural resources that Libya has.
Plus it changes. I mean, to your point, Julia. I mean, one of the things about North Africa in general is a net importer of food, and it's very like sort of like very vulnerable as far as the economic pressures are concerned and food production across the globe. I mean, when you import 80% of your grains, when you have a functioning government like in Egypt, never mind when you don't have a functioning government in Libya, that becomes a major point. And the other thing, geopolitically and globally, I think what we're seeing like in the Eastern Mediterranean, there is the war in Russia and like the whole idea of like moving away from reliance on Russia for energy makes the region of the Eastern Mediterranean a lot more important, not as a transit area, but as a source area. And unlike other parts of the Eastern Mediterranean, Libya is a source area. It's not a transit area, and there are interests there that have been steeped there for a long, long time. I've mentioned Total and ENI, so you have like two European allies or two European members of the European Union having very different objectives in Libya. And the same thing with like Greece and Turkey. They have two neighbors that have really conflicting interests over this area, and you have like Turkey coming up with this redrawing of the map of diagonally creating like maritime zones and like exclusive economic zones, which is I think a point that Professor Hasnaoui makes very accurately. I mean, one of the major issues here is the fact that we don't have the delineation of maritime zones. And I think you need to start from that perspective. And to give you an indication, it's Greece and Italy just like demarcated their maritime zones the last couple of years. And these are two countries that are in the European Union. Never mind countries that have conflicting interests, and Libya and Greece don't have the demarcation of the maritime zone. So that's part of the problem. So I think, I take Professor Hasnaoui's point which as a good point in the fact that you need to sort of like walk backwards from an institutional framework. Like you need to create a normative framework and maybe find those areas of cooperation and collaboration, like sort of to create the mechanisms of walking back. I don't know if I agree with the fact that like waiting for the national unity government or the government of Tobruk to come together, because to me both of those sides are proxy sides and they don't necessarily have their own idea in any way of coming together. They speak for somebody else, and their vested interest makes it very, very difficult for them to come together. I mean, so
Yeah.
I mean, Mr. Haftar continues to be his lifeline is the United States. So, and Egypt and the UAE and others in the region that have vested interests.
Yeah. So rewinding just a little bit to what you were.
We should not forget also about Turkey, an important point that I did not mention. Why I keep saying Turkey, because Turkey has been, in terms of signing agreement, has been among the countries, the proxy countries that tried to take advantage of, of this conflict in Libya. One of the things is that Turkey's fast approaching presidential elections, which is scheduled to be held in May 2023. I don't know whether it's going to happen because of the, earthquake that happened. Yeah. So I don't think that this doesn't help to calibrate the strategic communications that Ankara aims to articulate. I think that Turkish opposition leaders, they provide alternative vision for the Libyan crisis, and therefore they create both hope and suspicion about the future of the Turkish policy towards Libya. So we have to take also into account the upcoming elections of Turkey and their, I would say, and their impact on Libya.
Yeah, and then speaking of Turkey, I mean, Turkey has $15 billion on the table in Libya, that they would like to recoup, so it's real money with real vested interest. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that even whatever the reason might be, I think that one fact about because you have now, as you rightly put it, Haftar that's been endorsed by Egypt, by UAE, GNU that is being supported by Erdogan, by Turkey, etc. So I think whatever the reason might be, one fact about the Erdogan-Sisi rapprochement is rather obvious to foreign policy wonks. The thing that the Turkish government is seeking a way to break the tie that exists between various countries that form alliances against Turkey in the in the Eastern Mediterranean. It's another point that we have to take into account by making alliances or new diplomatic overtures to Israel, UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt. Turkey is aiming to kill the momentum that Greece and Cyprus have gained in the past few years, and Sisi has become a key player as well in the Mediterranean energy politics, which sometimes harm Turkish interests. So soon after becoming Egypt's president, he held several. We have seen that Sisi has held several meetings with the Greek and Cypriot officials to reach a deal on important natural gas from Cyprus. And after he later led efforts to establish the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum, which definitely excluded Turkey. So thus Turkey's Egypt relations cannot be separated from development in Libya, which has, I believe, geostrategic significance for both countries. So I think that that Egypt is also in the equation.
Yeah, I think we can just kind of round out with the last question here, but you mentioned this a little bit earlier about the Turkish-Libya accords that you were talking about. In your opinion, do you think that those will be able to stand, that they'll succeed?
The deals?
Yeah, between Turkey.
Well, the deals now, they have not been canceled. Even if the citizens are not happy about it, then other parties are not happy about it. But I think they will stay on as long as the Beba is still there, and as long as we see that the international community is not really putting a real pressure on these two countries to have these this agreement annulled.
Thank you. That was really insightful. All this has been really insightful. Dr. Vavakis, did you have any final thoughts you wanted to?
I'm very grateful to Professor Hasnaoui for staying up so late in Kuwait. And I really appreciate her knowledge of the region, and maybe we'll have her back and tell us about Morocco and Western Sahara and what's going on there, which is Morocco is a very, very important country with a great deal of presence in Europe and a great deal of presence even in the Abraham Accords and their relationship with Israel. So I was very, very happy that our audience had a chance to hear from Professor Hasnaoui, and I really enjoyed our conversation, and wish you all the best, and do be a frequent participant in our events.
Thank you so much, and for sure next time, if you're planning to do something within North Africa, I'd be happy to talk about Western Sahara, as it is also my pinpoint subject of expertise.
I'm sure.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vavakis. Thank you so much, Mrs. Julia. Thank you so much, Isaac, and thank you all for the audience for listening. I'm happy to share what I think from my heart as well, genuinely, and from what I understand as an expert in North Africa. Thank you so much.
Julia, you want to remind us about tomorrow?
Oh yeah, tomorrow morning. Actually not, well, tomorrow morning Eastern time. The first speaker will be Ambassador Ram Aviram at 8 a.m. Talking about the subjects The title of it is Walking on the Tightrope Between Values and Internet, New Challenges for the Stability of Eastern Mediterranean. And then there'll be two presentations after that, one at 10 a.m. Eastern and the other one, same times as today, the other one at 1 a.m. Eastern with Dr. Theodore Tzarkiris and Tikiri, Dr. Gabriel Haritos.
So come back tomorrow. Thank you, everybody. Thank you again to our guests. Have a nice evening.